I can't get this out of my.
Hi, everyone. Looks like we should be working. Thanks, everyone, for coming to Harbor House's Lunch and Learn. Done a couple of these now since COVID, so we appreciate everyone who tunes in. I am Cassie McDonald. I am the development manager at Harbor House, and I am with Tracy Plummet, who's our manager of community education and prevention. So we're going to talk today about how if we truly want to end domestic violence, we have to take a 360-degree approach and really look at all aspects of the cycle of abuse. And Tracy does a ton of trainings throughout the state, particularly in the community about this. So we're going to ask her a few questions and go through what she talks about and how helpful it can be for you, your work, or even just in your home. So feel free to type in some questions on the post and the stream. We'll get to those at the end, I promise. We'll be watching through the chat. So please ask any questions that you have. We're excited for them, and we're excited to talk to Tracy again. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Cassie. Hello, everyone. All right.
So why don't we start with why and what does to you, a 360 approach to ending domestic violence look like, and why do you think it's so important?
Well, I'll start with why it's so important. And the reason for that is because domestic violence doesn't just affect the direct victim. It doesn't, it affects everything about that person. So for us to only, try to focus on, what's happening with that person isn't broad enough because it affects everything. It affects, their children, their job, their faith community, their friends, their family, everything, pretty much everything that surrounds them is affected by domestic violence. And it also, in a lot of, I was going to mention this a little bit later, but in a lot of cases, most cases, most people that are dealing with this still want the relationship, but they want the abuse to end. And so we also have to make sure, and we also, need to put a lot of focus on offender services. So also, in doing a lot of the direct service that I did years ago, we found and we know that that what works best is when everybody's receiving services. And whether that's family, friend, coworker that can call in and say, hey, how can I best support? Or if it's their partner, their offender partner who is going through our offender program, the kids getting some help with the children's program, and then also with our client services. So we have really broad services because we have to make sure that we can have wraparound services for everything that's affected in that victim's life.
I don't think a lot of people know we work with offenders, and I think it's a really important part of our program and our mission, because if we don't work with the offender to try and have them understand the effects of the abusive behaviors that they're exhibiting, they might turn around and someone else could become a victim. So we want to make sure that we're working with them, and then maybe they can have a more healthier approach.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I tell a lot of people, especially when I'm training other advocates or service providers in around the state, is that domestic violence is not something that we can fix for other people, but we can certainly help people get to a much better and safer place. But, and that is done by us surrounding them with support and services. And that is our absolute focus. And it has to include offender services. It absolutely has to. I can tell you that one of the biggest kind of roadblocks, even with victim services, is trying to help the victim understand the offender's actions and reactions and why they do what they do. So it has to be a part of our services.
Absolutely. So when you think of your program here with community education and outreach, how do you think, and we kind of talked about this, but I wonder if you could talk about it a little bit more. So how do you think community education and outreach fits into Harbor House's mission and our overall community free from domestic violence?
Well, for me, it's the first step, right? Because the best way that we can help the direct victims and the family is to create support. And the way we create support is by educating and raising awareness about the issue, because that then helps people have a better understanding, and um, and then they can um, better recognize, respond, right, and feel confident about responding and referring for services, regardless of what those services are. You know, a lot of people don't reach out to us because they're afraid that once they reach out, then everything is going to kind of blow up. Like, you know, maybe the police are going to get involved, or child protective services is going to get involved. And that is not the case. You know, contacting us is confidential, and we don't, you know, we always make sure that the person that this is affecting most is making the decisions. We're just there to surround them with as much support and as many resources and services as we can. But the more that we can educate and raise awareness in the community, the more people we have to be able to recognize, respond, and refer. So for me, it starts with that. You know, the more people in the workplace, the more people in the shopping mall, and the more people in the restaurants, the more people that we have everywhere that has a better understanding of this, the more support we create for every single victim and family.
Absolutely. It's not an easy thing to talk about. And you might not always know that you're in it, but if you know you have safe people in your life that are there not to judge you, but to help you in whatever way you decide, that's what's really going to help everyone in this situation.
Right, because if you know that you're not going to get judged, or the person that you're telling isn't going to overreact, right, and just go, you know, I'm gonna do something about this, then you're going to talk, then you're going to invest, then you're going to trust. But if, you know, I always told people years ago when I was working with kids that the main two reasons that kids don't talk is because they either um, don't want to make somebody upset, right? They don't want to make them mad or sad, or they are very unsure of what your reaction is going to be. And it kind of goes to that same kind of thing, that it more the reaction part with the adult victims, but if they're not sure what your reaction is going to be, they're not going to tell you, which is why there's such a huge barrier with telling friends and family. Most people think that friends and family are the first people to find out about it, and Harbor House is a second. When in reality, friends and family and Harbor House are the last resort and the last people that we tell, because we're afraid of those reactions or the judgments or the embarrassment.
Absolutely. So we've mentioned a lot of different organizations and groups that could be helped. So what kind of groups do you typically present to in the area?
In our area, I do medical training. So and a lot of it starts out with just domestic violence 101. You know, we've talked about that in other lunch and learns and stuff, and just helping the people really understand the dynamics and what it's like and how you get stuck and those things. And then, you know, the second part of it usually breaks off and kind of specializes in the area that I'm speaking to. So I do medical trainings, and I do that. I work with doctors, I work with nurses, and then I do every like twice a year, I do nursing students with the university and with Fox Valley Tech. I also do criminal justice, so I train police officers, and then I also the criminal justice classes, other social services, early education classes. I also do other social service agencies. Um, I also go into the workplace and talk about that for two reasons. One, so that we can better help keep the person safe, and two, so that they can keep their job, right? Because I can guarantee you, if they lose their job, their choice, their decision to leave is gone. or at least almost gone, right? So it's really important that that we can create a support system at their place of employment. So that they can better, recognize, respond, and refer, but also so that we can create that space so that they can be safe and everybody there can be safe.
Right. Abusers can often come into the workplace. So
Yeah.
it's helpful to have people on board and know what to look for.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times what they're going to do is they'll either that or they'll like threaten to call your boss and get you in trouble, or they'll threaten to call your coworkers if they'll sit out in the parking lot. Or, a lot of times what a lot of people don't realize is what they'll do is they'll call and call and call, or text and text and text. And the more you have to ignore that call because you're working, the worse the threats get. And so, unfortunately, that causes a lot of problems, and it's a loss of productivity, missing work, and those sorts of things. And when people around you don't understand that, then we assume other things.
Right.
And so it is really important that we try. It's the same thing when I was working with schools. A little bit of information goes a long way with support. And I used to say all the time, I go into, to understand why we need to work with the schools. And it's because a little bit of information for that child can change the whole school environment. And it's the same thing with work.
Absolutely. So we're kind of touching on two things I want to ask you about. One, so then do you do kind of specific training for human resources departments and kind of that area because they're working with the hiring and any kind of employment issues that might come up? And then kind of on that vein, you kind of mentioned that it can be hard for someone in an abusive relationship to get a job. It can be just as hard for them to keep a job. So I think those kind of go hand in hand. So could you talk a little bit about, do you do specific training for human resources, and then just some other reasons why you would do that, and then why it makes it so hard for someone to be employed?
Yeah, we do it's called a safety awareness for employers, so the SAFE program. And again, it's domestic violence kind of 101 first, because we have to understand that first. And then we go into specifically how we can best help, not just the employee, but everybody, right? And so, and how we can problem solve, and then how we become a direct resource for that agency or that company, so that we can come in and safety plan or help in any way that we can. So we've done that. We've done that quite a bit with agencies and some companies around the valley. And the interesting thing is that every time we go in and we talk to, sometimes we do talk to human services, but we try to get people at different levels. And there's always, I haven't been to one yet where they haven't told me about an incident with an employee or an employee partner that it hasn't happened, where, they know, and they wish they would have had this information, when it was going on. And the other thing, in getting a job and in keeping a job, one of the things about getting a job is that, unfortunately, one of the I shouldn't say major, one of the main tactics of offenders, people with abusive behaviors, is isolation. And so they don't necessarily want you out in the community or out in public. They also don't want you making more money than them, because then they, if they make more money, then they can control the money. But they also don't want you talking to anybody. They don't want to take a chance on, like when I go and train hair professionals, and I've had them tell me that they'll have somebody come in with their partner, and their partner will sit right there, tell them how to cut their hair, and they will not leave so that they can even have a conversation with them. It happens with nurses also. And so,
Chiropractors, right?
yep, yeah. So it's just very different. They don't want to give their partner too many chances to be able to actually talk to somebody and tell them what's going on. And the other thing is that because the offender, people with abusive behaviors, are very unpredictable. They can be fine, and then one little thing can just set them off. And what it does is it just really wears on the person, because here's the thing: when you have a job, you value it. but if you value it, they're going to target it. If that makes sense. The person with abusive behaviors are going to always targets what you value most. And so, so that's why it can be very, very hard, but then keeping a job because, you know, what they're going to do is they're going to cause chaos and crisis when you need to go and do something, when you need to go to work, or when you have plans with your friends, or when, whatever the case is. They're not going to tell you you can't go, but they're going to create crisis and chaos so that you choose not to go. And then it's not on them, it's on you. But then we have missed days of work and loss of productivity and not being able to, being on your phone too much and those sorts of things. So, yeah.
So kind of in that vein, I know when we have some clients that we work with, you reach out to their managers while they're here, you know, or while we're working with them, who are seeking support from us. So is that kind of why you reach out to the managers? I know we've worked with quite a few employers in the area to make sure they're safe. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, it's kind of twofold, right? It's kind of what I just talked about. Number one, because we want them to make sure that they can be safe while they're there, and everybody else. It's important that at least somebody knows, because there's always, you know, I shouldn't say always, but almost always a lot of threats that happen. And if that's the one outlet that that person has, is going to work, it's a stable, consistent environment, which they don't have anywhere else. And it's their one outlet, right, where they can go without that person. Then we want to make sure that they're safe there, right? So that, and we also want to make sure that the company or the agency is also prepared, right? Because, and they need to know too, it's important. Nowadays, it's really important because unfortunately anything can happen. And the other is to help them keep their job. Because like I said, sometimes that's the only outlet they have. It's also the only lifeline, one of the only lifelines that they have in order to get out if they can.
Right.
If that's what they choose. You know, it's support, right? Family, friends, community connections, and a job is the two things that are the like main things that people need in order to break free if they can.
Well, and financial abuse is a huge
Yes.
tactic that not a lot of people realize that people use on their partners. You know, it is making you quit your job so you're financially dependent, or moving you around so your resume looks terrible, or, you know, there's a variety of ways you can control someone through finances. Really, this is a huge part of it.
It is. Yeah. Financial abuse is so much more prevalent and impactful than anybody knows, because it can actually go to the extreme of you not being able to have your name on a title of a house, on a lease of a house, or an apartment, title on a car, bank account, credit cards. Like you don't get your name on any of that. You know, I had one older woman that I just happened to take the crisis call. And she was really upset because she kind of uprooted herself and moved here to be with this guy, with this man. And after like, I don't know, 8 months, he was becoming abusive, very abusive and very isolating. And he just kicked her out because she had left her life in a different state and moved here. And she called me and she's like, well, he won't even like let me take my clothes. I have nothing. And he replaced my car, and he bought me this like $60,000 car, and I can't afford it. And I said, well, just let him have the car. And she goes, well, I can't because his name's on the title and mine's on the loan. So they do that kind of stuff that just makes you, you know, and so we had to find, you know, some legal help for her to get out of that. You know, as far as clothes and stuff, I'm like, well, it's a gift and that's, you know, too bad. You get to take it. But, you know, but she didn't know that before she phoned me. She didn't know. And so it's huge.
So at Harbor House, we often use the analogy of darkness when we're talking about domestic violence. Domestic violence lives in the shadows, and we have to shine a light on it so we can help it come out and really do something about it. So how is community education and outreach important in helping shine that light on domestic abuse?
That is a very simple but in-depth answer. And this very simple answer is because we talk about it, right? I mean, we talk about it. Most people, they don't want to talk about this. They don't want to talk about it. And whether that's just because it makes people uncomfortable, this is a lifelong, multi-generation. I mean, this has been going on forever, and that's a whole different lunch and learn to really talk about how embedded this issue is in our culture. And so any way that we can raise awareness shines light, right? So for me, every time I go out and talk to somebody, that is an opportunity for me to kind of connect with somebody and go have that aha moment, which to me is like a light bulb, right?
Mhm.
And if I can do that for one person out of whoever's listening to me, then that's a win,
Right.
right? Because then that one person can better recognize, respond, refer, and support.
Yep, absolutely. And we share the statistic a lot that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men are going to be in an abusive, intimate partner relationship in their lifetime. So it's pretty hard to not know someone who is in a situation that they could use some help with. So when you're doing some of your trainings or doing your education, how do you kind of experience that? Do you have people coming up to you, or do people have those moments? Can you talk about that?
Always. I don't know. Yeah, I've been doing at least some kind of trainings and presentations for probably 12 or 13 or 14 of my 16 years here. I started with the effects on kids and then moved to kind of everything. And I can't pinpoint any time that I haven't had somebody come up to me or wait to talk to me or just disclose right in the group. And I've spoken in front of one person to 250, 300, 400, I think was the biggest group that I spoke to. So always there's always disclosure because of education. There's always disclosure because of better understanding. And there's always disclosure because of more empathy. Once we get it, it makes a difference. So always.
What kind of groups should sign up for these trainings? Who should?
I'm probably biased, but I think I mean, if you look at the statistics, right, and actually that 1 in 4 is getting closer to 1 in 3 now, right? So we know that, as far as women and the highest risk group are girls between 16 and 22. They are a solid 1 in 3. That's our high school and college age girls who need this information. We need to know what to look for. We need to know how to be healthy, right? And to recognize when it's not. And so if you look at that, and men too, I always looked at it I worked with a lot of kids when I was a children's advocate. Half of them were boys. And it is so, so, so important that we include everybody in our education and in our services. Because unfortunately, there's an awful lot of boys growing up in these environments. And, and unfortunately, in these kind of environments, they're told not to cry, not to emotionally react. And that's human, right? So, with those statistics, you have to assume, even though we're not supposed to assume, that somebody somebody you work with, somebody you worship with is dealing with this issue. So what group shouldn't we do?
Right.
That would be a lot shorter list. You know, I go out and I'll go sit down with church groups. I go to assisted living places. I go and talk to teachers. I talk to a lot of volunteers. I go and do volunteer training for all kinds of volunteers. We have so many volunteers in our community. So that's hard for me to answer because I don't think any. You know, I go and do confirmation classes. So.
Well, it goes into it next. We've got a couple questions from people watching. The one is, do you have any quick resources available for anyone who needs to educate themselves on how to respond when someone in their life discloses experience with domestic abuse? Do we have materials or any information that we can have for them?
We do. We have a friends and family actually brochure that we have, or you can just call, right? Anybody, if you call here, it is a crisis call. If you're calling just because you're not sure what to do, we still consider that just like as if somebody was actually calling because they're experiencing themselves, because the more we can help you, we can still help. Because a lot of times we can't get the person to come in. They're not comfortable, and that's okay. But we can help you either help them or try to help them more through you. So just reach out. Anybody can call.
Right.
Just reach out or come in and get the information. Or you can make an appointment to talk to somebody if you really need to. I have talked to hundreds of parents and friends and coworkers over the years. I've talked to parents who don't even live in Wisconsin because their child lives in Wisconsin and needs help. So just don't hesitate to reach out. Even if you're not sure, we'll help you.
We have a lot of info on our website too, so you can kind of take a look at it ahead of time, decide if you want that information and feel comfortable reaching out to us.
Mhm.
So when we talk to schools, was another question. How do we kind of talk to kids? Because I know some people, I think, have some misconceptions. We're not talking necessarily about what kind of abuse you're receiving when we're talking to kindergartners, right? It goes back to those healthy relationships and all that kind of stuff. Can you talk a little bit about how we change the conversation for schools?
Yeah, we do age appropriate, right? So when we're talking to like first graders through third, fourth grade, we will talk about healthy behaviors, right? How to be a good ally, bullying, self-esteem. We talk about that kind of stuff. And what one of the examples is our education person will take a piece of paper and it's of a body, right? And then I'll have them draw it and color it in and that sort of thing, however they want. And then they have them crumple it and then open it back up and realize that every one of those crinkles is somebody being mean to them or something happening to them. And the fact is that we can iron it out as much as we want, but we're never going to get rid of those wrinkles. So that's the kind of stuff that, we talk about, just self-esteem and bullying and and I'm telling you, kids disclose too. Like they get it. Then once we get a little bit older, then we talk more about kind of in the middle, we talk more about healthy relationships, really. And so, and safety, right? When we're scared, what do we do when we're scared? What do we do? Those sorts of things. Like we kind of start to safety plan a little bit with them. We do that with the little ones too, but not as much. And then once we get into pretty much middle school, we start talking about, again, healthy relationships, but more dating. And of course, how to be safe in the home. And then, as we know, our numbers are higher in high school. So we talk about dating violence, partner violence, and healthy. We all, it's important that we also talk about how to be healthy, not just what to focus on with bad. So we definitely talk about how to be healthy.
Well, I know we're about out of time, but thank you, Tracy. I think this was super helpful. Thank you for everyone to watch. And if you have any interest, if you want Tracy to come and speak at your work, at your church, at your faith community, at your knitting group, I know we've done a few of those. We do a lot of chiropractor, hair salon, dentist offices, because sometimes that is where someone can be alone. So please feel free to reach out. We'll post the link, but you can go onto our website, email Tracy directly. And again, all of that is always free. We're happy to come to you, and never hesitate to contact Harbor House. So thank you everyone for joining, and don't forget to check us out online, harborhousewi.org. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.